and she stopped. Now she doesn't. You have to put the light bulb back down. She doesn't use the lights anymore. But I feel like I kind of forced it. Is that a bad thing to do things like that? To kind of.
Not necessarily. You know, first of all, your child. How old is your child?
She's 9.
She's 9, so she's still pretty young. At that age, what is necessary is to first discuss it with your child. And at some point, you know, a lot of children, if they don't understand what's going on and why that is happening, then it's going to cause a lot of resistance with them. So first you have to understand, you have to educate them on what OCD is and what's happening with their bodies, okay? And then you have to make an agreement. Basically what I ask children to do is make a list of all of the OCD rules that they have. And then I have them graded. So for a 9-year-old, you might want to just do low, medium, high, because 7, 8, 9, 10, that's, you know, a little bit too much for them to handle. So just do low, medium, and high. And you're going to work on the low rules first. And let's just say, let's just work on this one rule. Because the goal is you want her to be accountable, number 1. And number 2, you want her to make the initial effort rather than be forced into that situation. So if she's able to make that effort, that is a lot more powerful than taking the light bulbs out, right? Now, if you have that agreement that the rule is that you're not going to turn on that switch, and my question to you is it the light bulb coming on and off, or is it the switch that's the trigger?
It was the light bulb coming on and off, but during the daytime it's so bright in the hallway. She just never noticed, never looked up to see that the light bulb actually came on. But it's the light in the hallway. She wants the light in the hallway if she wants to.
Okay, all right. So, you know, work on the lower ones first and have the agreement. And you might need to give her a reward for being able to accomplish this rule this week. You know, have that agreement with her. Now, let's say that you have that agreement with her and she's not able to engage in it. Then I would have another talk with her and say, well, what do you think about having some help, such as, I'll just remove that light bulb for you, and see how she feels about that. And if she's not ready to do that, then maybe this rule isn't ready to be worked on right now. Let's pick up another rule. The goal is for her to be able to put in the effort rather than you making her, because it is a lot more powerful for her, because she's the one who will feel empowered. I can do this. If I can do this, I can attack all of the other rules. Versus, if you did it for her, well, I didn't really do it, I was just made to do it. So I don't feel empowered to be able to attack any of these other rules. Now, if the compulsive behavior is dangerous, that's something completely different. Then you do have to take control of that situation. So for example, turning the stove on and off, on and off, on and off. Okay, that can potentially be a dangerous situation. And at that point, you do need to take control over that. Such as, and I don't know about removing the whole stove, however, if you have a gas, turning that off until you're ready to use it. Okay? Even putting tape over the knob so that it can't be turned on and off, or on or off. Moving the whole knob completely. There are stoves where you can remove the knob and then put it back on. Child safety knobs. Okay? There was another question here first.
It wasn't a question so much as a illustration of your point about the differential diagnosis. Because when my son was 4, he had just turned 4, he was diagnosed with ADHD. Before he turned 5, he was diagnosed with bipolar. Then then it was ODD, and then OCD. The OCD was threaded. It was really some of the most profound rituals that were never really focused on. And every time there was a new diagnosis, there was a new drug. And now, today he's 16, and we're dealing with giving him daily hormone injections because consequently from a lot of the drugs that he was taking, he's now taking hormone injections, and it's really, you know, it's really the OCD, as it turns out, that was really probably the culprit all this time.
Absolutely.
So it can really be so damaging to not realize that at a very young age, because he's probably suffered unnecessarily
Right.
along the way.
You know, it's interesting because one of the parents of the child that I did work with, the one with the Kraken monster, she's also a psychologist. And even though she had suspicions of OCD, she wasn't certain that it was OCD. And the school diagnosed him with ADHD, even autism, you know, put him on so many different drugs before they finally concluded that it might be OCD. Actually, he came to my office and I told him it's OCD. So, you know, even though she's a psychologist, she still had questions because those behaviors seemed like inattentiveness. However, the inattentiveness was because he was ruminating. So I get that a lot, and it's unfortunate, which is why it's so important for us to continually increase the public's awareness about what OCD is, especially with schools, because that's where your child spends the most amount of time. Okay, other questions?
Going back to the first question, do you have a realm of an age cutoff, like below for a younger child, for them taking that level of responsibility? Like even for, my son's 6, and he only has a few issues in this realm of what we're talking about, but in that, he probably has like management skills of a 4-year-old. And you're talking about, you know, the having the discussion before is always met with a no. So he doesn't participate in the discussion to make the agreements.
Well, so are you saying that he's not able to communicate with you?
No, like in the situation where she took the light bulb out, where we did have one big issue with the potty, which we've resolved, that was completely me setting up the plan.
Okay. However, he does know about his own rules, right?
I'm not sure how.
Right. It's, you know, like I said, the youngest that I worked with was a 4-year-old, and she knew about all the rules. I mean, the parents helped. You know, well, I see you do this and that. So, I mean, you can help the child make that list of rules. However, at the end of the day, the child needs to decide, am I going to work on this rule or that rule? Unless it's a dangerous situation. Now, you can encourage the child, well, how about we attack this rule this week? And if you do, you'll get, you know, whatever the reward is to encourage. However, it's important for that they feel accountable for what they're doing. Because that's where they'll get their self-esteem from. So you can encourage them as much as possible and guide them as much as possible. However, it'll be much more powerful if you let him make that decision. What to do.
Yeah, our son is 13. He's been treated since he was 7. And one of the most frustrating parts for us is especially with children's response therapy, is the OCD keeps manifesting in different ways. So we'll address one thing and he'll get through it, and then it pops up like whack-a-mole, and it pops up someplace else. And he's not very good at transferring what he's learning from one instance to the next. And I feel like since we're not addressing the core issue, but I'm not sure what that is.
Is the therapist that you're working with a specialist?
Yeah,
in OCD?
last year we've gone to a specialist in OCD.
Okay. The goal, you know, I have a lot of kids who come in and say, well, you know, my previous therapist just made me do this and made me do that without the understanding of why. Again, you know, it's important for your child to understand why, so that that knowledge will transfer. And, you know, is your child here?
Yeah.
today?
Next row.
Tell him to come to our workshop after this. It starts at 11 o'clock.
Yeah, he's gonna be there, I think.
Okay.
Yeah.
Our goal is to, teach them, these are the set of rules. This is in your toolbox. No matter if you're washing or you're tapping or you're repeating, whatever it is, it's the same, which is don't listen to the OCD monster.
Right.
Whatever the OCD monster tells you to do the opposite. Okay, so that's essentially the rule. Now, eventually, the core underlying fears have to be addressed, because otherwise OCD will continue to pop its head in different areas, and that is something that the therapist has to do. So if you're working with a specialist, then that's something that should get addressed later on. Once the child has skills in managing the compulsive behaviors, then the next task is to figure out what are those underlying fears. Okay, and do exposures to them.
Right, thanks.
Yes, our daughter is 10. Her main issue has been washing her hands after she uses the bathroom or washes areas that she thinks are not clean. And she's been very resistant to doing sort of structured ERP. She'll say, this is silly, it's an artificial situation. Mostly what we've done with some guidance from the therapist, although she's not seeing the therapist regularly right now, is kind of behavioral incentives to do less of the washing less of the arm, washing less time. But I guess the concern I have, we've made a good deal of progress that way, although with some setbacks, but at what point does that process become so gradual that it's kind of accommodating the desire? If I'm saying, okay, you can't wash 5 minutes this week, you can wash 4 minutes, and next week we'll try for 3 minutes. Like I said, it seems like we've made some progress, but when we talk about the process of learning that would allow her to sort of get, I don't need to be washing, how do we tell when we're putting enough pressure on her that she might actually be unlearning the association?
Well, the rule of thumb with all compulsive behavior is if you're going to, the process of breaking the rituals is to do it differently. So meaning that you can't have the whole week, I'm going to wash less than 3 minutes. It means right now I'm going to do 10 seconds. Tomorrow I'm going to maybe just do my fingertips. Like each time the child engages in a compulsive behavior, it cannot be the same as the previous time. They have to do it differently each time. The reason being is because whatever you're getting them to do, if you're doing it too long, that in itself will become the compulsion. So it's got to be different each time, and never the same any 2 times. And in essence, when they do that, then they're breaking the ritual to the point where, I'm doing this so differently, I may not even need this anyway. At some point, again, they have to be accountable. They have to agree to do something that we call 3-day no washing. So not only do you resist in the compulsive behavior, you also have to do exposure to contaminants as well. So purposely playing with dirt, outdoors, purposely touching toilets and not wash, and letting that anxiety habituate. Because what's happening is probably your child isn't habituating to that anxiety, so that process isn't taking place, and they're not learning that I don't need to do this, and my anxiety will go away on its own.
One, that is part of the issue that she really hasn't been willing to work. Tolerate the high level of anxiety that will go with not washing or with washing only her fingers. She'll tolerate, okay, we're not going to wash, above our elbows today. That this week we're only going to wash up. And that's kind of the most that she's been willing to sign on to. And as I said, she's made incremental progress, but I can still see that she's not really learning that kind of habituation process. She's not overcoming the anxiety. Except maybe in relatively small doses. That's my concern.
Well, she's probably also not learning that process because she doesn't understand the rules of how habituation occurs. Like what I just spoke here, I would do that with even a 4-year-old child. so that they understand. Of course, I will frame it in a way that they understand it, in metaphors that they understand. However, you know, it's probably because she's not motivated.
Well, and part of it is her symptoms have gotten enough better that they don't interfere that much. And she says, why should I get really, really uncomfortable? I can wash my hands for 3 minutes and it doesn't keep me from living my life. And
Right. Because, you know, if she understands that if she doesn't fix it, that it will come back with a vengeance,
that's the problem.
then she needs to understand that. Thank you, everyone. If you have more questions, I'll take it outside to get our next speaker prepared.
She did very well. It's okay. She knows and
She just like a top. She just like a top.
no. But she, you know, they need to know. Thank you for helping. I really, she wanted that. Without you, it wouldn't be possible. Thank you very much. Huh? Yes, darling. Yes, darling.
I guess we have to, oh, this may still be on.